In this video, I will go through the solution to this question carefully. Pause the video and read through the paper that's on screen now. So if you've read through this, then you will see the first thing to do is to create a class called donor, and it will have these fields, and you are going to create two constructors. Now that is true of any paper you are going to write from now on. Any OOP paper will start off by telling you to create a user-defined class, whatever its name is, and then two constructors as well as the fields that are required for that user-defined class. Let's go to Delphi and see how I've done it. So I've already created the class. Please call your classes that you create, your user-defined classes, put a T in front. So it needs to be a donor class, and we call the class tDonor, and the T refers to it's of type donor. These are the fields that need to be created in this class, and they must be private. Why private? Because our question states that the fields must not be accessible outside of this class. Our next question is to create the two constructors, a default one and a parameterized constructor. My default constructor, I start off under the heading public because it needs to be accessible from outside this class. Constructor create semicolon, ignore overload. We only need overload because we create a second constructor with the same name. So this is the default one. If I press Ctrl-Shift-C after typing these lines, then Delphi will create the shell for the constructor, and that shell will consist of constructor tDonor.create and begin and end, but with nothing in between. The reason I put these values in is because our question says that will initialize the fields to default values, and default values for strings are empty strings. So you need to put in code that will initialize the values. And that's my constructor. So the second question's been done. The third part says create an overloaded constructor, and that's this part over here. You can see that this constructor create, has to have the word create there, and then the parameters that we are going to use to get values which we want to place inside our fields. So these are all values that will come from the outside. They are of type string, and we must put the word overload because there is already a default constructor, and the word overload now needs to be placed behind the default constructor as well. Once again, if you press Ctrl-Shift-C now, it will create the shell for this overloaded constructor. There's my constructor tDonor.create, and Delphi would have created the begin and the end as well with nothing in between. We need to make use of these parameters to fill the values of the fields of this class. You are supposed to get the values from these parameters and put them into those fields. The next question, code mutator methods and accessor methods and a toString method. Once again, in all future OOP tests or exams that you will write, you will create mutator methods, in other words set methods, accessor methods, in other words get methods, and a toString function. Mutator methods will be procedures in Delphi, and accessor methods will be functions in Delphi. So the mutator methods, these procedures, set email and the parameter my email of type string, and procedure set cell with my cell as the parameter, and these functions get first name, get last name, get email of type string. Once again, if you merely created these, well, even the toString method, the first part, and press Ctrl-Shift-C, then Delphi will create the shell for those functions and procedures. Let's go and have a look at the setters, or the set methods, or the mutator methods. So there are the two setters, tDonor.setCell, and this is created by Delphi, and you need to write this bit of code inside, where we take the parameter and allocate it to the field fcell. The same with my tDonor set method. We take the email value that comes through as a parameter and we store it in the field of this class. Let's have a look at our getters, or our accessor method. These have to be functions. By the way, you could see here that our setters are procedures because they return nothing, but our get methods, or our getters, our accessor methods, need to be functions because they must return the value we're looking for. So there are a few of them. Function tDonor.getEmail, and this is of type string. It's a string function, and we return the result of the field email in this class. And we've done the same for the other two as well. And now we get to the toString method. What a toString method does is, according to the prescriptions in your question, in your test, it will return a single string that contains the fields in some format. So let's have a look at the question. Our question says, code a toString method to display the above fields on separate lines as follows. Now what must you do? You must create in the toString method a single string made up of all these with #13s in between so that it starts on a new line, but it's still one long string. And this long string will have these instructions or descriptions: first name, and then the value of first name, then last name and the value of last name, email and the contents of the email field, cell number and its contents, etc. So create a single field that contains all of those. Now look what we've done here. We created a temporary variable called tempString of type string, and here I am building up tempString. Firstly the word first name, then the field value and #13 to go to a new line. Then tempString is the old tempString, which is now this, plus the descriptor last name, plus the field value and #13 to go to the next line. And we do that for all of them. And finally, once my tempString is being created sufficiently or adequately, we send this to result, which will put it back into the name of the function and return it to whichever application makes use of it. Question 2.1.7, code a method validate. And this validate will take an email address as a parameter and check that the email address contains an @ symbol and at least one full stop. And we've given you a clue here. Whenever we create a validate function, it has to be Boolean. In other words, true or false, and true and false is always Boolean. So I need a function because I'm going to send back a true or a false value, and specifically of type Boolean. I need an email address as input, and now I'm checking if this email is a valid email. If the position of the @ symbol in the email, in the parameter, is greater than 0, in other words it means that there is an @ symbol somewhere in that email, as well as the position of a full stop in that email is also greater than 0. Now I know it contains both an @ symbol and a full stop. Then result, that which is returned in the name validate, is true, and otherwise this will be false. The next question is to create a unique barcode, and the barcode is created by using the first character of first name and the first 3 characters in the last name, as well as a generated integer which must be between 32 and 50. So we'll probably use the random function because that's what the question demands, and we'll have to create 18 values and then add those 18 values to 32. Let's have a look at the code. Function tdonor.genCode. I need 2 temporary variables in this case. I start off by using the word randomize so that I seed my function to produce random numbers every time I run the program. Then tempCode. This temporary variable is equal to lowercase because the question states that the first character of the first name in lowercase, and that one must be in lowercase as well. So lowercase, copy of first name or from first name from position 1 for 1 character. So now I have copied from the first name the first character. Then I must add to that copy from surname from position 1 the next 3 characters, and I've stored all of this in tempCode. Then temp integer is a random number, and random produces numbers from 0 up to 1 less than this value. So I need 18 of them, so I need from 0 to 18, and that's why I make this 19, and we add that to 32. And in this line I add the integer value to tempCode, but I need to convert it to string first. And my result that I return is this tempCode over here. And that's the end of our user-defined class. What remains is to create an application that makes use of this user-defined class. So typically our application will start off by creating an object of the donor class. Once I have this object, I must do a few things. Get the inputs from the user, in other words, last name, first name, address, cell phone, etc. Check if the email address is valid. If it is valid, then we send these fields into this donor object that we've created, and then we display the details. How would we display it? Obviously, you will be making use of the toString class that you've created. If this address was invalid, then we must prompt the user to just enter the first name and surname again. Right at the top, it says create an application that repeats until the user enters HALT as the first name. I'm going to leave this for the moment, and we can put it in right at the end. So let's start off by instantiating an object of the donor class. So in my application, I need to make use of the donor_u class. That's my pass file, and as a global variable I created the donor of type tDonor, and I put in my class a button to start the process and a rich edit on which I will display. So let's look at the way I've done this program. My button run click procedure has a number of variables. I've put them there and they're all of type string. I'm filling them in by prompting the user to enter the values. So my first is equal to input box, and the rest of the details are over there. And here's my loop. While uppercase my first, so I've just asked for my first. While this is true, or while this is not equal to HALT, continue with the rest. And when it is equal to HALT, of course, let's go back to the bottom. Our program merely stops. So the first thing that happens is I read in values prompted to the user into these variables that I've created within this button. Then I create or instantiate an object of this tDonor class. And you must do this. You must have the value that you've used at the top, the variable name of type tDonor, and this is equal to tDonor dot, and this is the constructor method. So I start off using the default constructor because I have no values and I need to create the object in order to be able to use the validate procedure. So I create the variable, and I think your question actually says that. Instantiate an object of the tDonor class. So we can't use the overloaded constructor. You must use the default constructor in order to get these marks. Then if the donor.validate, my email, that's the value we've read in over here, equals true. I've left out the equals true because I don't have to actually say equals true. But if you want to put it in there, you are welcome. Then the donor is the donor.creator. Now I use my parameterized constructor to send all the field values through the parameterized constructor to the donor class, where they will be allocated to the donor. So we've done this. If the address is valid, send them all into the donor class. We can't do this with setter methods because we only created 2, or maybe 3 if I remember correctly. So we'll have to use the parameterized constructor. Display the details, and we'll do that using the toString method. So readout.lines.add the donor.toString. So toString receives the values in one single string from our method, the toString method, and it prints it on the rich edit. And we follow the printing of the toString method by also printing the generated code. And look now, in order to let my loop work, I ask for the first name again so that the while loop can decide whether it must stop or continue. Let's run this program and see what happens. First name, let's make it John. Surname is Blake. Email, let's put in john@blake.com. Cell number and landline number. Now notice what happened. All our input was correct. My email address is valid. Notice that the cell number and the landline number didn't print. I can fix that by getting the input from the user immediately after I validated the email. So I copy those 2 lines and place them here. Another thing to fix is the fact that the generated code left the capital letter for the surname, and I fixed that by putting the lowercase in front of the copy surname command from position 1 to 3. Let's run our program again and see what happens. Let's check. The first name appears, the last name appears, the email appears, and the cell number and the landline number. And now my generated code consists of a lowercase letter from the first name as well as the first 3 lowercase letters of the surname. And at the same time I have my input box waiting for some more answers, and it will stop the moment I type in halt.